My fiancée called me cheap, humiliated me over money, then slapped me while cheating behind my back, so I exposed everything, canceled the wedding, and walked away forever. My name's Adam, I'm 29 and I work in IT. I've always been pretty chill, maybe even too much. I don't like drama or making a big deal out of things. I'd rather talk stuff out and move on. Kendra, my ex-fiancée, was the opposite. She's 27, works in marketing, and thrives on energy. She's charismatic, super outgoing, and loves being the center of attention. When we first got together, her fiery personality was one of the things I loved about her. She was passionate, determined, and had this confidence that made you believe she could take on the world. Over time, though, I started noticing that her passion sometimes crossed a line into stubbornness. There were little red flags I ignored, like the time we went to a dinner party with my coworkers and she made a comment about how I could have dressed better in front of everyone, laughing as if it were a joke. Or how she always had to pick the restaurant when we went out. If I suggested something different, she'd either roll her eyes or say, "Well, I guess you don't care if I enjoy dinner." At first, I thought it was just her being particular, but it started to feel like things always had to go her way. It became clear that if she wanted something, she wouldn't back down until she got it. I brushed it off for the most part because, well, no one's perfect. Fast forward 4 years and we're engaged. Wedding planning was intense, to say the least. Kendra wanted this massive Pinterest-perfect wedding with over 200 guests, an elaborate venue, and God knows how many floral arrangements. I, on the other hand, wanted something smaller, intimate, and manageable. We weren't rolling in money, and I didn't see the point of blowing our savings on a single day. But every time I brought up my concerns, it turned into a fight. She'd accuse me of not caring about the wedding or not wanting to put in the effort. I tried to explain that I wasn't against the wedding. I just wanted us to be realistic. It wasn't just about the guest list either. Every detail had to meet her exact vision. I remember one time she spent 2 hours debating with the florist about the color of the centerpieces, only to snap at me when I suggested we go with something simpler. "If you're not going to take this seriously, why are you even here?" she said, completely ignoring the fact that I'd left work early to make it to that appointment. It wasn't about compromising, it was about her winning. Then came that night. We were in the living room, buried under the chaos of wedding planning. Papers were scattered everywhere, sticky notes clinging to random surfaces, and a big binder stuffed to the brim sat open on the coffee table. Kendra had spent months assembling that thing, and now it looked like it was holding her sanity together by a thread. She was pacing, back and forth, her words tumbling out in an endless rant about finalizing the guest list. She was fixated on inviting a sea of distant relatives I couldn't even begin to place. Cousins thrice removed, their kids, their plus ones. It felt absurd. I sat on the couch, watching her whirl around the room like a storm, trying to find the right moment to speak. "Kendra," I said cautiously, "do we really need to invite people we barely know? Shouldn't this be about the people closest to us?" She stopped mid-step, slowly turning to face me. Her eyes were sharp, her posture stiff. "Why don't you take this seriously, Adam? Do you even care about this wedding?" That question hit like a punch to the gut. I felt the tension in my chest rise, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Of course I care," I said evenly, "but it's not about how many people are there or how extravagant it is. It's about us, about starting our life together." Her expression darkened and her voice rose. "You just don't get it. This isn't about us. It's about celebrating what we have with the people who have been there for our families. This is supposed to be the most important day of our lives, and you're treating it like a business transaction." "It's not that," I said, struggling to keep my frustration in check. I just think we need to be realistic. We can't afford to invite half the state. That's not what's going to make the day special. Her laugh was short and bitter. Realistic? You mean cheap, right? You don't care about making this day memorable, you just care about the price tag. Kendra, come on, I said, my voice trailing off. Tightening the budget isn't fair, she said, stepping closer with anger in her eyes. I'm trying to prevent us from going into debt over this. Isn't that what matters? Starting our marriage on solid ground? Her voice was sharp, as if it could cut through the tension. You always do this. You make me feel ridiculous for wanting something beautiful. Why do I even bother trying to make this special when you clearly don't care? I stood up, frustration boiling over. Don't put words in my mouth. I care, but I'm not going to pretend that throwing money at it will make it better. This is supposed to be about love, not putting on a show for people we barely know. She trembled now, her face flushed and her hands balled into fists at her sides. You're impossible, she said through gritted teeth. You don't hear me. You never hear me. Her voice cracked, and for a moment I thought the tension might break into something softer, maybe a chance to de-escalate. But then she closed the distance between us, her movements abrupt and determined. Kendra, let's just... Before I could finish, her hand came down hard across my face. The slap echoed in the silence that followed, leaving a sharp sting on my cheek and an even deeper one in the pit of my stomach. For a second, I just stood there, stunned. I had never been in a situation like that before, and it felt like time froze. My cheek burned, but it was the disbelief that hit me hardest. This was someone I loved, someone I was supposed to marry, and she had just crossed a line I never thought she would. I stared at her, my mind racing to process what had just happened. Her expression shifted immediately from fury to shock, her mouth opening slightly, her face pale. Adam, she whispered, her voice shaky and unsteady. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't. I couldn't speak for a moment. I felt my chest rising and falling as I fought to keep my composure. Looking back, there had been moments leading up to this. The way she'd throw verbal jabs when she didn't get her way, or escalate every disagreement until I was the one who brushed it off just to keep the relationship intact. This wasn't a one-off. It was the boiling point of something that had been simmering for a long time. Finally, I stood up slowly and deliberately, meeting her eyes with a calmness that surprised even me. Pack your things, I said, my voice quiet but unyielding. Her eyes widened, and she took a half step back, her hands clutching each other. What? Adam, wait. No, I didn't mean it. You have to believe me. I wasn't thinking. Stop, I interrupted, holding up my hand. I don't care what your excuse is. You put your hands on me, Kendra. That's not something I'm ever going to tolerate. Get your stuff and get out. She started crying, pleading with me to let her explain, but I wasn't having it. There's nothing to explain, I said firmly. You crossed a line and I'm done. Pack your things and go. She tried to argue, but I wasn't going to let her guilt me into backing down. I stood there, arms crossed, watching as she grabbed her purse and some of her things. Her hands were shaking, and she kept looking at me like she expected me to change my mind, but I didn't. When she finally left, the house felt eerily quiet. I sat back down on the couch, staring at the wedding binder amidst the mess of papers she'd left behind, realizing that I had just ended a 4-year relationship in the span of 15 minutes. And the craziest part? I wasn't even angry anymore. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, notifications. It felt like the whole world wanted to know what was going on. Kendra must have told a few people, and it spread like wildfire. I decided to start dealing with the fallout first. I called my parents. My mom answered right away, her voice bright and cheery as if she were expecting a wedding update. "Adam, how's it going? Did you and Kendra finally decide on the cake?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, there's no cake, there's no wedding. I broke it off." She didn't say anything for a moment, and I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "You what?" in that tone only a mother can pull off. Equal parts shock and disappointment. "Look, it's a long story," I said, "but it's over. Kendra's out of the house, and I'm calling off the wedding." She didn't take it well. "Adam, this is a huge deal. People are expecting a wedding. Do you realize how embarrassing this will be for everyone involved?" "Mom," I cut in. She crossed a line. More silence. Then she softened. "Oh, honey, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, "but I'm not marrying someone who thinks that's acceptable." Seemed to click for her. She let out a long sigh and said, "I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. I'll tell your father. Do you need anything?" "No, I'm good. Just maybe give me some space for a bit." She agreed, though I could hear the worry in her voice. After hanging up, I moved on to the next task, canceling the wedding. I started with the venue. The woman on the other end was polite but hesitant when I told her we wouldn't be moving forward. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "We'll need to discuss the deposit." "Keep it," I said. "I don't care." Then there was the photographer, the caterer, and the DJ. Each call felt like ripping off a bandage. By the time I was done, I was mentally drained. That's when the texts from Kendra started pouring in. At first, they were apologetic, long paragraphs about how she was sorry, how she didn't mean to slap me, how stress had overwhelmed her. Then they shifted to anger. "I can't believe you'd throw away 4 years over one mistake," she wrote. "You're being so dramatic." By the end of the day, her messages were a mix of desperation and guilt-tripping. "You're ruining my life," she texted. "Everyone's asking me what happened and I don't know what to say." I didn't respond to any of it. What was there to say? She knew what she'd done. Things got worse when mutual friends started reaching out. Some were supportive. My buddy Nate called to check on me. "Dude, I heard what happened. Are you okay?" "Yeah," I said, "just dealing with the fallout." "You did the right thing," he said. "No one should have to put up with that." Others weren't so understanding. Kendra's friend Taylor, for instance, decided to take her side. She started posting vague but pointed comments on social media. Stuff like, "Some people can't handle a strong, independent woman," and "Imagine being so fragile, you ruin a relationship over nothing." She didn't tag me directly, but it was obvious who she was talking about. It didn't bother me as much as it should have. If anything, it was just annoying. I didn't care what Taylor thought of me. What did bother me, though, was how Kendra's parents reacted. Her mom called me the day after I ended things, her voice shaky and full of guilt. "Adam, please don't do this," she said. "Kendra's been under so much stress. She didn't mean to hurt you." "I'm sorry," I replied, "but there's no coming back from this. I can't marry someone who thinks it's okay to lay hands on me no matter the reason." "She's devastated," her mom said. "She loves you. Can't you give her another chance?" "No," I said firmly. "I've made my decision." Her dad called later that evening, but his tone was colder. "I don't know what happened," he said, "but this is going to reflect badly on both of you. People will talk." I almost laughed. "With all due respect, sir, I'm more concerned with my personal boundaries than what people might say." He hung up shortly after, clearly unimpressed. By the end of the week, it felt like I'd been put through the ringer. I wasn't sad or heartbroken, just exhausted. The emotional weight of dealing with everyone's opinions was heavier than I'd expected. Then came the rumors. Someone, I'm guessing Taylor, started spreading the word that I'd overreacted and that Kendra was the real victim. A few mutual acquaintances reached out to hear my side, which was their polite way of saying they didn't believe me. She said she was just stressed. You didn't have to kick her out, did you? One person texted. I ignored the message. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Despite all the noise, I felt lighter without Kendra in my life. The house was quieter, yes, but it was also peaceful, and there was space to breathe without arguments and tantrums. Still, something about the whole situation didn't sit right with me. Kendra's reaction to the breakup felt off. Sure, she was upset, but her focus seemed less on what she'd done and more on how I'd responded. The way she tried to paint herself as the victim didn't make sense, especially since she was the one who crossed the line. I started wondering if there was more to the story. Was the slap really just a moment of stress, or was there something deeper going on? It wasn't like her to lose control like that. That nagging thought stayed with me until I met up with Lauren, a mutual friend who always seemed to know what was really going on. I wasn't expecting much, but what she told me changed everything. Odd. She called me up one afternoon, sounding hesitant, which was rare for her. Lauren isn't the type to hold back. She's blunt, and that's one of the reasons I've always trusted her. Hey, Adam, she started. Can we talk? I think there's something you should know. I could tell this wasn't going to be good. What's up? I asked, trying to sound casual, even though a knot was forming in my stomach. She paused for a moment and then said, Not over the phone. Can we meet in person? I agreed, but my mind was already racing. I hung up and sat there for a while, staring at the wall, wondering what she could possibly have to tell me. Whatever it was, I had a feeling it was going to put the last few weeks into perspective. I spent the rest of the day going about my business, but my focus was shot. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Kendra's reaction to everything, the way her friends and even her parents were trying to spin the situation, didn't add up. She wasn't just sorry for what she did, she was desperate to control the narrative. That desperation reeked of guilt. I started replaying everything in my head, trying to piece together the bigger picture. Kendra wasn't some loose cannon. She was calculated, always thinking 3 steps ahead. That slap wasn't just her losing her temper. It felt intentional, like she wanted me to react. But why? Then there was the way she'd been blowing up my phone. At first, it was all apologies and tears, but when I didn't respond, it turned into anger and blame. One of her texts stuck with me. You're making this way bigger than it needs to be. Just talk to me and we can fix it. Fix what exactly? I hadn't done anything wrong. The more I thought about it, the more it felt like she was projecting, like there was something she was hiding, and she needed me to stay in the dark. By the time I met up with Lauren, I was ready to get some answers. We met at a little cafe downtown, one of those places that's always packed but somehow manages to feel cozy. Lauren was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with a coffee in front of her. She looked up as I walked in, and the expression on her face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't going to be a casual chat. I slid into the booth across from her and gave her a nod. All right, Lauren, spill it. She hesitated, which wasn't like her. Look, she said, I didn't want to get involved, but after everything that's happened, I feel like you need to know. Now what? I asked, leaning back in my seat and crossing my arms. She sighed. It's about Kendra and Chase. Hearing that name made my jaw tighten. Chase, that guy again. Kendra's so-called friend. I'd heard about him before, always in passing, like he was no big deal. But something about the way she mentioned him now made my stomach twist. I'd never liked the idea of her having guy friends. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I know how guys think. And Chase? Yeah, I had a feeling he wasn't just some harmless buddy. "What about him?" I asked, my tone sharper than I intended. "My friend was at a bar a few weeks ago," Lauren began. "She knows you and Kendra were engaged. I've mentioned you guys a few times, so when she saw Kendra there with Chase, she thought something seemed off." "Off? How?" I asked. There it was, the thing I'd been trying to ignore since the slap. I didn't say anything, just stared at her, waiting for her to continue. "They were holding hands," she said, lowering her voice like someone might overhear, "and kissing. She took a picture but didn't know what to do with it because she didn't want to cause drama." I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. "Drama? This whole situation is drama. Let me see the picture." Lauren hesitated again, then pulled out her phone. She scrolled for a moment before sliding it across the table. There it was, a blurry but unmistakable photo of Kendra and Chase, his arm around her waist, her hand on his chest. I stared at it, feeling a strange mix of anger and clarity. "Well, that explains a lot," I said, pushing the phone back toward her. "Adam, I'm sorry," Lauren said. "I didn't know if I should tell you, but after everything, I couldn't keep it to myself." I appreciated her honesty, but I wasn't mad at her. None of this was her fault. "Thanks for letting me know," I said, my voice calm. Too calm, probably. "You okay?" she asked, eyeing me like she thought I might blow up. I nodded. "Oh, I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. At least now I know the truth." The truth was, I wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep down, I'd known something wasn't right for a while. Kendra had been acting weird for months. Distracted, defensive, picking fights over nothing. I'd chalked it up to wedding stress, but now it all made sense. She wasn't just stressed, she was guilty. And that slap, that was just the beginning. It wasn't just a moment of frustration. That was her attempt to bait me, to give her an excuse to flip the script and make me the bad guy. She didn't want to be the one to end things because that would have made her the villain. Instead, she pushed me until I snapped. Or at least until she thought I would. But the thing is, I didn't snap. I didn't give her that satisfaction. I stayed calm. I told her to pack her things and leave. Now, with Lauren's information, I knew I had done exactly the right thing. I sat in the cafe for a while after Lauren left, sipping my coffee and thinking about my next move. I wasn't going to confront Kendra right away. No, I wanted to see how she would react when I didn't take the bait. She had been trying to control the narrative since the breakup, painting herself as the victim and me as the unreasonable fiancé who couldn't handle the pressure. But now, I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to let her spin her lies any longer. By the time I got home, I had a plan, and I preferred to do this face-to-face and on my terms. So I texted her, "We need to talk. Meet me at my place tomorrow at 7 p.m. She responded within minutes. "Finally. I've been waiting for you to reach out. I knew you'd realize you overreacted." I didn't bother replying. Let her think what she wanted. Tomorrow, she would see just how wrong she was. The next day, just before 7 p.m., I cleared my living room. The coffee table, usually cluttered with work papers, was empty, except for a single printed photo sitting right in the center. Everything about the space was intentional, calm, controlled, and deliberate. Kendra thrived in chaos, in shouting matches, and in emotional outbursts. But that wasn't my game. I was setting the terms. At 7 p.m. sharp, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Kendra standing there in a dress I recognized immediately. It was the one she wore on our 3rd anniversary, back when things were good. She had paired it with flawless makeup and her most disarming smile. The effort was obvious. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, her heels clicking against the floor. "I'm glad you reached out," she said. "I knew you'd come to your senses." I motioned toward the couch, not responding. She hesitated for a moment, then walked over and sat down, her smile faltering slightly when she noticed the photo on the table. "What's this?" she asked, picking it up. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. The room was silent except for the faint rustle of paper as she adjusted the picture. Her hands stiffened, her voice tightened. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" I replied. She looked up, her confident demeanor cracking. "It's not what it looks like." "Then why don't you explain it to me?" I said, my tone steady. She hesitated, the gears turning in her head as she searched for the right lie. Finally, she let out a small laugh, though it sounded hollow. "Adam, this is ridiculous. Chase is just a friend. Someone must have misunderstood what they saw." I remained where I was, my face calm, my stance unyielding. The silence between us stretched uncomfortably long until she broke eye contact, looking down at the picture again. "Adam," she tried again, her tone softer now, almost pleading. "I know this looks bad, but I swear—" "Stop," I said sharply, cutting her off. "Don't waste my time. We both know what this is, so why don't you drop the act and tell me the truth for once?" Her shoulders slumped slightly, and for the first time, she looked unsure. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "Fine, yes, I was with Chase, but it wasn't serious. I didn't mean for it to go anywhere." I pushed off the wall and took a step closer. "It wasn't serious," I repeated, my tone cold. "Then what was it? A hobby? A stress reliever? Explain it to me, because I want to know how cheating on your fiancé fits into your grand plan." Her lips trembled, but she quickly masked it with a defensive tone. "I was overwhelmed, Adam. The wedding, the planning, everything. I felt like I was drowning. And Chase, he was just there when I needed someone to talk to." "Talk to," I said flatly, gesturing toward the photo on the table. "You call that talking?" She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "No," I said, taking another step closer. "You just didn't care enough not to." Her head snapped up, her expression a mix of anger and guilt. "That's not fair," she said, her voice rising. "I made a mistake, okay? But you weren't exactly perfect either. You were so distant, so focused on budgets and logistics. You didn't even notice how stressed I was." I tilted my head, slightly unfazed by her attempt to shift blame. I realized that the stress she felt justified her lying, sneaking around, and even slapping me. Her face flushed, and she opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She wasn't used to being confronted like this, without any room to wiggle out of the corner she had backed herself into. "I get it now," I continued. "The slap wasn't just a moment of anger, was it? You wanted me to react. You wanted an excuse to end this without having to take responsibility for anything. Am I wrong?" Her silence spoke volumes. "You wanted me to lose my cool," I said, leaning slightly closer. "But I didn't, and I won't, and that's why you're here now, scrambling to salvage whatever narrative you thought you could control." "Adam, please," she said, her voice breaking as tears welled in her eyes. "I messed up. I know I did, but we can fix this. I'll do whatever it takes." I straightened and took a step back. "Fix what, Kendra? The trust? The respect? You think those things just snap back into place? This isn't something you fix. This is who you are, and I'm not interested in being a part of it." She stood up abruptly, her voice rising again. So that's it? You're just going to throw everything away? 4 years, Adam? 4 years? And you're going to walk away over one mistake? This wasn't one mistake, I said firmly. This was a series of choices. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie. You chose to cross the line when I didn't give you the reaction you wanted. This isn't me throwing anything away. This is me walking away from someone who already did. Her tears came then, streaming down her face as she reached for me. I stepped back again, shaking my head. Don't. You don't get to play the victim here, not after everything you've done. She stood there for a moment, her hand frozen mid-air before she let it drop. The tears didn't stop, but the fight in her eyes was gone. She knew she'd lost. Get out, I said quietly, pointing to the door. Her lips quivered as she whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't respond. The door closed behind her and silence filled the room. After that confrontation, I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. Whatever lingering feelings I had for Kendra were gone, evaporated the moment she confirmed every suspicion I'd been too cautious to fully trust. I didn't need closure because I just handed it to myself. But life has a funny way of keeping the show going. A couple of weeks passed, and I started to feel like myself again. The house was mine once more. Not just physically, but emotionally. It was quieter, cleaner, and most importantly, peaceful. I got back into my routine, focused on work, and even reconnected with a few friends I had neglected during the relationship. That's when the first cracks in Kendra's new life started to appear. I hadn't heard much about her since she left, and I wasn't actively looking for updates. But mutual friends have a way of keeping you in the loop, whether you want to be or not. Nate, my best friend, and an absolute vault of information, called me one evening with that tone he gets when he's trying not to laugh too hard. Bro, he said, barely able to contain himself. You are not going to believe this. What? I asked, already bracing for something ridiculous. Kendra moved in with Chase. I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. And he dumped her hard. Now that got my attention. What do you mean, dumped her? I asked. I mean, he kicked her out, Adam, Nate said, clearly enjoying himself. Apparently, she's been staying with her parents ever since. Word is he caught her cheating on him, too. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not just a chuckle, but a full-on, can't-catch-my-breath laugh. Karma doesn't always work quickly, but when it does, it's poetic. Wait, I said, still grinning. She cheated on Chase? With who? Some guy from her gym, Nate said. Apparently, they'd been hooking up for weeks. Chase found out and threw her stuff out on the lawn. One of his neighbors took a video of it and posted it online. I shook my head, half in disbelief and half in satisfaction. Send me the video. Nate didn't even hesitate. Within seconds, I had a link to a grainy clip showing Chase tossing garbage bags full of Kendra's belongings onto the grass while she stood there crying and yelling at him. He didn't say much, just pointed at her car and shouted something about her needing to leave before he called the cops. It was a mess. A perfect karmic mess. I realized how blatantly obvious it was that her pattern of self-destruction was finally catching up to her. Guess she's not as smooth as she thinks she is, I said, smirking. That's an understatement, Nate replied. Dude, it's wild. Everyone's talking about it. Even her little social media crew is turning on her. Taylor hasn't posted anything defending her since it all went down. Taylor, Kendra's self-proclaimed best friend, had been one of the loudest voices trashing me online after the breakup. She'd posted all kinds of vague, passive-aggressive nonsense about fragile men and how real women intimidate the weak. I'd ignored it, of course, because engaging with her wasn't worth my time. Figures, I said. Taylor's all about appearances. She's not going to stick her neck out for Kendra if it makes her look bad. Exactly, Nate said. Anyway, just thought you'd want to know. Karma's doing its thing. We wrapped up the call, and I spent the rest of the evening replaying the video a couple more times, each time feeling a little less guilty for enjoying it. The days that followed were interesting, to say the least. I started hearing from more mutual friends, most of them either apologizing for doubting me or trying to dig for details about what had happened between me and Kendra. I kept it short and simple. She crossed a line. I ended it. That's all there is to it. The truth is, I didn't feel the need to explain myself anymore. People could think what they wanted. The ones who mattered knew the truth, and the rest? Not my problem. For now, I was just planning to clear my head from all this mess, but I had a feeling that Kendra wouldn't easily move on. Hey guys, I wasn't planning on posting an update, but something happened recently that I feel like I need to get off my chest. For those of you who followed my last post, you know I kicked Kendra out of my life after everything she pulled. The slap, the cheating, the manipulation. It was all too much, and I wasn't about to let her walk all over me anymore. Life had been solid since then. Peaceful, even. But of course, Kendra wasn't done yet. Last week, she showed up at my house. Yeah, you read that right. I wasn't expecting it. I hadn't heard from her in months, and I assumed she was off doing whatever it is people like her do when their life falls apart. I was sitting on the couch halfway through a documentary when there was a knock at the door. It was late, close to 10 p.m., and I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door to find her standing there. She looked rough, hair messy, eyes puffy, makeup smeared like she'd been crying the whole way over. This was a different Kendra, one I barely recognized. "Adam," she said, her voice shaky. "Please, I need to talk to you." I didn't even let her finish. "No," I said, stepping back to close the door. "Wait," she cried, holding the door frame. "Please, just hear me out. I've been thinking about everything and I know I messed up, but I've changed. I need you to know that." I stared at her, my hand still on the door. "Kendra, I don't know what part of 'we're done' you didn't understand, but nothing you say is going to change that." She started crying harder, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you, okay? I know I screwed up, but I've been going to therapy, journaling, working on myself. I've been trying to fix everything I ruined." I shook my head. "Good for you, but that's not my problem anymore." Her tears didn't stop. "Adam, please, I love you. I never stopped loving you. I didn't know how to handle things back then. I got lost." I laughed, a short, sharp sound that made her flinch. "Lost? You didn't get lost, Kendra. You made choices. You cheated, you lied, and you slapped me. None of that was an accident, and none of it was my fault. So don't stand here and act like I owe you anything." "Can't we just talk?" she begged, her hands clasped together like she was praying. "Just for a few minutes?" "No," I said firmly. "We have nothing to talk about. Whatever you think we had, it's over. It's been over since the moment you decided to betray me." Her face crumpled, and for a second I thought she might collapse. "Adam," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I don't have anyone else." I stepped back, my hand tightening on the door. "That's not my fault, and it's not my responsibility to fix." I pushed the door closed, but she stopped it with her hand. "Please," she said again, her voice desperate. "Just give me a chance. I'll prove to you that I've changed." I let out a sigh, leaning against the door frame. "Kendra, you don't get it, do you? This isn't about whether you've changed or not. It's about the fact that I don't trust you anymore. You broke something that can't be fixed. No amount of therapy or Promises will change that. Her hand fell to her side as she stepped back, her shoulders drooping. For a moment she stood there staring at the ground. Then she looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking, "for everything." I nodded once. "Good, now go." I didn't wait for her to respond. I closed the door, locked it, and walked away without looking back. Through the window I saw her standing on the porch for a few more minutes before she finally left. And that was it. No dramatic ending, no last-minute arguments, just a clean break. Honestly, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no regret. It was as if a weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying had been lifted. People like Kendra don't change overnight. Maybe she'll figure herself out one day, but that's not my problem. I refuse to let her back in just because she's finally realizing what she lost. For me, self-respect isn't negotiable. Once someone shows you who they really are, you don't give them the chance to do it again.